Today we're honored as our graduation speaker to have someone who has stood apart, and I welcome now to the platform, to the podium, Keith Bowers.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Dean Robinson, for that great introduction. I'm truly honored to be here with you during your commencement today. Personally, I believe you are graduating from the best college at West Virginia University, the Davis School of Agriculture, Natural Resources, and Design, the one, I think, with the greatest potential to make a real difference for the future of our planet. Not to mention that I had the privilege of graduating from the same college some 32 years ago in landscape architecture, so I may be a bit biased. This is an especially important year because it is the 50-year anniversary of the landscape architecture program. And while I'm not old enough to have been here for those early days, I have certainly tracked its history for long enough to know how the program has come since the 1980s. A big congratulations to the LA program. And to everybody graduating today, let's give a big shout out for all the moms. They have been waiting a very long time for this moment. No, really, some of them have been waiting a really long time for this moment. Happy Mother's Day to all you moms out there. I want to tell you a story about why this college rocks and why you are perfectly poised to take on the challenges and opportunities that our planet so desperately needs you for. The city of Cleveland, Ohio approached me and my firm last year with a problem. As many of you know, the Cuyahoga River, nestled within a beautiful glaciated valley, winds its way north and empties into the Lake Erie in Cleveland. This is the same river that caught on fire for the 13th time in 1969, that focused the nation's attention on the environmental crisis we are now facing. Imagine that, a river catching on fire not once, not twice, but 13 times. Well, now, thanks to the heroic efforts of the city, its citizens, and many of the industries that line the river's banks, the Cuyahoga has improved to the point that many fish are returning to use the river to spawn, feed, and live. The only problem is that the lower part of the river is a shipping channel with an active port. As you can imagine, the riverbanks and port are lined with steel bulkheads or retaining walls. While this may be great to contain the river channel for the large cargo ships that ply its waters, it really doesn't do much for the young-of-year fish trying to get out of the way of these ships, hide from predators, and find the sorts of food they would typically come across in shoreline grasses. In fact, very few of them survive. So Cleveland turned to us to help them develop a new bulkhead that would benefit the fish and aquatic life of the river. So what to do? How do we redesign a bulkhead that contains the river but can also serve as habitat that nourishes and protects young-of-year fish? We turn to biomimicry, the discipline that studies nature's best idea and then imitates natural forms and processes to solve human problems. The classic example that we all know is Velcro, a design that mimics the construction of a burr seed that you often find tangled in your dog's hair or stuck to the shoelaces after you walk in the woods. The burr seed sticks to your clothing because it's comprised of hundreds of tiny little hooks, which is how Velcro is made. With the principles of biomimicry in mind, we asked ourselves, what can we reference in nature that will help us redesign the bulkhead to support aquatic life? More specifically, we asked, how does nature provide food and shelter, and how would we apply those ideas to designing a bulkhead that supports life instead of taking it away? And what if that bulkhead could be made out of natural material that attracts wildlife while filtering contaminants at the same time, similar to coral reefs? And could we use 3D printing to manufacture bulkhead panels that are customized to specific fish communities and river systems? And what if we could use citizen scientists armed with smartphone apps to monitor the effectiveness of these living bulkheads and allow us to manage them adaptively? And then we could empower local industries to manufacture and install these living systems, providing local jobs and livelihoods to underserved communities. And what if we license this technology through the Creative Commons, giving waterfront communities across the globe free access to this technology? What if? Now, think of all the disciplines we need to make this happen. Wildlife and fisheries, soil and plant science, landscape architecture, environmental and natural resource economics, biochemistry, conservation ecology, sustainable design, manufacturing, recreation, parks and tourism, and computer programming, to name a few. Does this sound like the Davis College? You get the picture. Many of you graduating today represent these disciplines, and Davis is the place where they come together. Today's challenges require answers that are not confined to a single discipline. In fact, they can't be solved in any meaningful way by implying the Industrial Revolution model of reductionist, compartmentalized, myopic thinking. Over time, academic disciplines have become increasingly isolated from each other, and the scholarship has become even more constrained. But colleges such as Davis break down those divisions. Davis recognizes that the only way to solve the pressing issues of our time, climate change, food security, natural resource scarcity, species extinctions, and poverty, is through multiple and seemingly unrelated disciplines. Today's answers require us to think beyond our own silos in a cross-disciplinary, interdependent way. This touches every one of you. Breaking down those barriers between disciplines can lead to futuristic solutions to any problem. For example, fashion designers may one day be teamed with microbiologists to develop fabrics that will contain living microbes that sense changes in our body temperature and alter the material's fibers to keep us warmer or cooler. Our clothes will be alive. This isn't about being connected or even interconnected. Instead, it's about being interdependent. As John Muir, the renowned naturalist and fierce advocate for wilderness, reminded us, when we try to pick out anything by itself, we find it hitched to everything else in the universe. Today, we find ourselves so connected to one another in so many ways that it's hard to imagine life without these connections. For instance, I can't imagine raising my teenage daughters without the ability to keep in touch with them via text messaging or on Facebook. The trouble is that we're losing a deeper sense of connection, not only with people around us, but with nature and natural systems that sustain us. For me, I have found forging these deeper connections, these interdependencies, has made all the difference in the world. After today, you will all be setting off in different directions, but I urge you, each one of you, to continue to tend to the special relationships you have with your professors and classmates. The world is much smaller than you may think. Now, one great thing about graduating from WVU is its close proximity to so many outdoor activities and the opportunity to connect with nature. Cheat Lake, Seneca Rocks, New River Gorge, Dolly Sods, and on and on. I'm sure all of you had some great experiences in many of these places, some adventurous, some maybe a bit more contemplative, and others that you probably wouldn't rather not share with your parents. As I slogged my way through landscape architecture program at WVU, I was continually drawing toward the natural places in the world. I was continually drawn toward the natural world in all these great places, and some that I didn't share with my parents either. I became increasingly curious about how nature worked, and more importantly, how to put it back together again when it was broken. Fortunately, in the summer between my junior and senior years, I came across a company on the eastern shore of Maryland that was pioneering the science and art of tidal wetland restoration. Like the Cuyahoga River catching on fire, many of our natural habitats are simply disappearing from the landscape. We have witnessed a precipitous decline in wetlands throughout the United States, and over half of our original wetlands in the lower 48 have been drained or converted to other uses. Except for the groundbreaking work associated with the restoration of the Curtis Prairie under the direction of Aldo Leopold in the 1930s, and which I might say is located at the Longenecker Arboretum at the University of Wisconsin, named after William Longenecker, the father of recently retired WVU landscape architecture George Longenecker, a great connection back to WVU. When I was in college, only a handful of people had been engaged in what we now know as ecological restoration. Up until then, The primary means at which people participated in the environmental movement was to give money to a conservation organization that bought and protected land. But I discovered Dr. Edward Garbish, a professor from the University of Michigan, who took a sabbatical in the early 1970s, moved to St. Michael's, Maryland, and began tinkering with salt marshes. He started by propagating and growing marsh grasses. Then he set out to learn how marshes function, and finally he developed, through much on-the-ground trial and error, techniques to restore and revegetate tidal marshes up and down the eastern seaboard. Today, tens of thousands of acres of marsh are restored each year thanks to Dr. Garbish's tenacity, determination, and vision of 40-some years ago. For me, all I could think about at the time was, how cool is this? Someone was getting paid to be on the water all day, whizzing around in an airboat, planting marsh grasses, and getting a tan. Now that was for me. Little did I know that most days consisted of swatting away merciless mosquitoes, horseflies, and no-see-ums, fighting off stinging nettles and sunburns, getting stuck in the mud up to my chest and having to be rescued by ropes and winches out of the thick, oozing muck, watching my unmoored boat drift haplessly into the shipping lane in Baltimore's harbor. And if all that were not enough, after an exhausting day of planting thousands of plugs of marsh grass, returning the next morning to find that all the plants had been unceremoniously yanked from the ground and devoured by flocks of hungry geese during the night. Not so glamorous as I thought. Even so, I was sold, and more importantly, I had a mentor. I started looking into the field called ecological restoration. It seemed obvious to me that people had a role in helping to restore ecological systems that have become damaged, degraded, or destroyed. I also discovered that even though the field was in its infancy, I most likely required training in ecology, geomorphology, and a whole array of ologies that would take me years to learn, not to mention that if I was really going to be successful at this, I probably needed a good grounding in business, none of which I had. I was about to graduate, so it was too late for me to begin taking electives in these disciplines. I finished out my undergraduate, and without thinking of graduate school, immediately, and somewhat naively, started Biohabitats, an ecological restoration company. Now this makes it sound like I knew exactly what I was doing, but it didn't feel like it at the time. Many of you may still be looking for that job that grabs you. Maybe you have an idea of what you'd like to pursue. Now is the time, but don't expect it to be easy. When my business partner left because he was tired of a shoestring budget and living with his parents, and so was I actually, and so were my parents, it certainly didn't feel like I was implementing a grand plan. Well, I did have a vision, or at least an inkling of a vision. Unlike many of my friends, this vision was not about making a lot of money, or even, in fact, being employed. Although I didn't think about it in those terms at the time, looking back now, I see that the vision I was beginning to articulate was about something much bigger, fairly audacious, and certainly outside of myself. Restore the earth and inspire ecological stewardship. Many people, again, including my parents, weren't so sure there was a market or even a need for restoration. It turned out that having that vision, a vision that transcended an immediate desire to make a living, turned out to be even more powerful and fulfilling than I could have imagined. I would wish the same of each of you. Having a vision is more powerful, and that not only keeps me focused on a bigger purpose, but more importantly, it resonates with so many people. It is something that all of us can participate in and make a real difference. And it transcends generations and cultures. Knowing that my actions have helped conserve valuable habitat for endangered species, such as the red-cockaded woodpecker, or helped restore a vast swath of eastern deciduous forest, or helped inspire the city of Baltimore to make their inner harbor swimmable and fishable by the year 2020, is extremely gratifying, as is knowing that these projects have supported the livelihoods of hundreds, if not thousands of people around the globe. A vision doesn't necessarily tell you what to do today. It only tells you where you want to be in 5, 10, or say even 32 years from now. There were 1,000 decisions along the way, and half the time I felt like I was making them without any plan at all. When you're in the early days of something, it doesn't always feel like the beginning of anything, certainly not your life's work. Often it is only looking back after all those little daily choices fall into place and start to make more sense than they did at the time. Over the years, it's become more clear to me that the glue that holds the vision together, that steers those thousands of choices toward a higher purpose, is passion. I'm fortunate. I didn't find a job. I didn't just find a career. I found a calling. I fell in love with the idea of restoring the earth and inspiring ecological stewardship. While it can be exhausting at times, it ignites me, it motivates me, it invigorates me, and most of all, it's an absolute blast. Some of you may have already found your calling, others not quite yet. That's okay. Put trust in something you're passionate about doing and don't let up. And dare to dream big. Come up with a vision with a higher purpose. Combine that vision to use it, and don't be afraid to take the lead. And when you do, be prepared. Be prepared to jump in full force, to stay true to your values and purpose, and most of all, to practice humility. Remember, vision without action is a dream. Action without vision is a nightmare. That's courtesy of the Honest Tea bottle cup, often my source of profound inspiration. Perhaps even more inspiring are the words of Wendell Berry, the great American novelist, poet, environmental activist, cultural critic, and farmer, and what I believe is one of his best activist pieces, the Manifesto, the Mad Farmer Liberation Front. Berry urges us to ask the questions that have no answers, invest in the millennium, plant sequoias, say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant and that you will not live to harvest. Say that the leaves are harvested when they have rotted into the mold. Call that profit. Prophecy such returns. Put your faith in the 2 inches of humus and that will build under the trees every 1,000 years. I urge each of you to seek out and embrace diversity. Refocus from what's in it for me to what's best for the common good. Be the change agent. Dare to think big and love what you do. Go from being the best in the world to being the best for the world. Congratulations to the class of 2014. Go out and make the world a better place for all life on earth. Thank you, and let's go Mountaineers.